All right, here's a very important issue, and that is that this year, finally, the wider public are waking up to the fact about the privatisation course of our NHS. And when we're talking about our NHS, we're talking specifically about NHS England, because, of course, health is a devolved power, a devolved competence. So the Scots, the Northern Irish and the Welsh have much more nationalised NHS and healthcare, whereas in NHS England we're seeing this massive privatisation, which is a problem and which is a threat for various different reasons, and it really does need to come to a head and come out in the open. Now, as we're having this discussion about privatisation, I don't know where this comes from or who started it up, but there have been rumours flying around that if we stay in the EU, or even if we stay in the single market, then that, because it's a free market economy, prevents us from re-nationalising our NHS like the Labour manifesto would have us do. Is this true? Short answer, no, it's complete and utter BS. But whenever you see something like that come your way, and various people ask me, you have to go and check out why. So my first gut reaction was, well, no. Parts that are in the marketplace have to obey by single market rules, and things that are public are completely under the national competence, and it's the government's choice whether it puts parts of a health system in the marketplace or in a public sphere, and that's its own choice. So I went and I asked this question to Professor Tammy Hervey of the University of Sheffield, who is an expert in EU law and specifically health-related stuff, and she's been doing this for years. And she said, yep, you're absolutely right, that the government has a choice of whether things are in the marketplace or it's in the public domain. If it's in the marketplace, it obeys by market rules, but you can put it in the public domain and it obeys by whatever rules the government wants. However, as they say in infomercials, wait, there's more, which is that because the EU recognises health as a national competence, i.e. the governments are fully in control of it, they can do what they like, then it means that even should the government of a country decide to put its health in the marketplace, you can still put protections around that marketplace so that the government keeps the free market out of it if they want. That's what it means. You've got that extra layer of protection. And the classic example of this happening was when we were negotiating the TTIP deal, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership deal between the EU and the US, when various nations in the EU had part of their health service within the marketplace. And because they didn't want American insurance and health provision companies coming in and chomping things up, they started putting in a whole ton of protections in order to ring-fence this off from the deal. Our government, David Cameron, wouldn't do that until the last moment, but it can be done, and that's what other countries were doing. TTIP eventually collapsed because that was the will of the European people, putting pressure on the European Parliament, and so that didn't happen. So, also bear in mind that within the UK, you've got NHS England, which is getting privatised, but then the other three nations which aren't. So, you may then at this stage say, right, okay, that's fine. If you want to stop further privatisation, you can. All the mechanisms are there and it's fully allowed within the EU or single market to stop the rot. But what about reversing it? Can't companies sue a government for trying to renationalise? This one is slightly harder, but only slightly, because there isn't a precedent for it within the EU or EEA that something gets renationalised within health. However, Professor Hervey told me that basically you can look at a whole load of other things which will tell you that it's just not an issue at all. Firstly, if you look at any of the legal disputes within the European Union over the years, essentially the more central something is to the national health system, the more the EU says, look, we don't have anything to do with that. The other factor is where the money comes from, whether it's the public fund through taxpayers or whether it's private money. If it's private money, like people buying services at opticians or dentists, well, that's kind of in the marketplace. Whereas if it comes from public taxation, then that's public fund, that's national level control. And so basically, if you're talking about something like renationalising core services paid for by taxpayers' money, then there's not a sniff of a chance that these big companies can sue. Or I wrote down here what Tammy said. She said, vanishingly unlikely. So there's not a jot of evidence that there would be any problem whatsoever to fully renationalise the NHS within the EU or within the single market, so within the EFTA structure of things. So this thing is a plain myth, it's a plain rumour, and if you see anything to the contrary, please feel free to share this video. I'm encouraging Tammy to write a piece on it that we can put out in to a media source or something like that, so we've got a standard reference. And if anyone says this, ask them where they got it from. You know, what's the proof, what's the evidence, because I have not seen any, and this one does need to be busted. All right, cool, thanks.